In the windswept valleys of the Mongol steppes, whispers of terror carried farther than the hooves of Genghis Khan's unstoppable armies, and legends claim that the very earth trembled beneath the weight of his wrath. For he was a ruler who valued loyalty, discipline, conquest, and fear as equal weapons, and to maintain control over the most diverse empire the world had ever seen, he developed punishments that would echo through centuries, though his campaigns were built on speed, cunning, and brilliant military strategy. It was his approach to law enforcement that instilled absolute obedience, and travelers returning from his territories spoke with trembling voices about torture methods designed not for pleasure, but to enforce order with terrifying efficiency, starting with one of the most feared practices, the slow crushing, where criminals were placed under layered wooden boards while soldiers gently added weight across hours, until bones quietly yielded under increasing pressure, leaving victims conscious, aware, and horrified as every breath became more expensive than gold. And while this was not meant to be gory, it demonstrated to his soldiers that betrayal collapsed slowly, one rib at a time. Then there was the chilling punishment known as the sand burial, used mostly for traitors, where captives were buried up to their necks in the desert and left beneath the blazing sun, unable to move, their thirst becoming torture itself as the sand heated like burning metal, and insects tickled across exposed skin. And the psychological agony caused screams to echo over dunes like haunted melodies, while nearby villagers were forced to witness the result, cementing obedience in their hearts long before soldiers ever arrived. For Khan understood that fear traveled faster than arrows. Another dreaded method was the dehydration gauntlet, where prisoners were tied face up on wooden boards in open plains while guards placed bowls of salty meat beside them, encouraging hunger but denying water. And as the salt tightened their throats like a noose, their minds sank into madness. But this was not merely punishment. It was a demonstration of what happens when someone endangers the fragile balance of an empire built on steel and silence. But perhaps the most infamous rumor was the oil drop test, in which a tiny drop of searing hot oil was allowed to fall slowly onto the exposed skin of a prisoner's forehead. One drop every few minutes, never enough to kill quickly, but enough to break the spirit through anticipation and dread, turning minutes into eternal nightmares. Proving that pain is not always physical. Sometimes the fear of waiting becomes the torture itself. And under Khan's harsh legal code known as the Yasa, merchants caught cheating, spies caught whispering, and soldiers caught deserting were punished not so society suffered, but so society learned. And the Mongol Empire expanded across continents while maintaining some of the lowest crime rates of its age. But what truly struck fear were the mobile courts that traveled with the army, where guilty verdicts could be executed instantly, ensuring that law walked beside conquest like a twin shadow. One controversial torture technique was the iron bridle, a metal harness locked around the head with spikes poised just inches from the skin, and any movement would puncture the flesh, teaching prisoners the terrible lesson that control of the body meant control of the mind, and witnesses described how even the strongest warriors trembled as soon as the bridle snapped shut, silently promising pain at every breath. Stories also darkly recount the weight of shame, where traitors were forced to carry heavy stones through camps while being jeered at, and refusal to walk simply meant being dragged through dust until the stones crushed their dignity, a psychological torment far more effective than swords. But the darkest of them all, according to folklore, was the steppe cage, a wooden frame just large enough for a person's body, where captives were locked for days, exposed to wind, sun, and freezing nights, unable to stretch, rest, or sleep. And this was used not only to punish, but to send a message that the empire's grip was tighter than iron, and prisoners often broke mentally before physically, confessing secrets simply for the promise of rest. However, perspective matters because despite these brutal legends, Genghis Khan enforced strict laws prohibiting the torture of innocent civilians, and punished his own officials if they were found abusing power, revealing a paradox inside this fearsome ruler. Brutality was not for entertainment, but for control, and he believed that an empire held together by mercy alone would crack, but one held by discipline and respect could span the horizon. This duality is why his empire lasted, why historians still debate whether he was a monster or a misunderstood genius, and why his name echoes like thunder through history books. But one thing is clear: these torture methods traveled farther than arrows, burning themselves into the memory of every village, every kingdom, every trembling ruler who dared defy him. As his armies rode forward, people surrendered before battles even began, lowering banners without a single sword clash, And in this way fear became a silent army marching beside the Mongols, conquering hearts long before cities fell. Travelers today still speak of abandoned ruins where wind howls like screaming ghosts, and scholars argue whether the methods have been exaggerated by terrified chroniclers. But the psychological power remains undeniable, a testament to how fear can rule more effectively than steel. And as you listen to this chilling history, imagine standing in a world where the horizon darkens beneath galloping warriors, where laws are carved into the bones of traitors, where honor can save you and betrayal destroys you slowly. And if tales like this fascinate you, if you crave forgotten history, mysterious empires, and shocking truths buried beneath centuries of dust, then do not turn away now, because your curiosity is your strength, and there are countless stories still waiting in the shadows. So make sure to, as news of Genghis Khan's terrifying punishments echoed across the empire, an even darker chapter of discipline unfolded within the silent walls of his mobile courts, where no whisper went unheard and no plea went unanswered. For the Khan believed that fear was a tool only when used with precision. Travelers spoke of a terrifying method called the whispering chamber, where traitors were locked in a small echoing tent and forced to listen to the screams of others, not knowing if they were real or psychological tricks, causing their minds to fracture long before their bodies did. More chilling was the frozen vigil, used in brutal winter campaigns, where prisoners were tied to wooden posts half naked in the snow, compelled to watch fires burn just beyond reach, their shivering bodies shaking like wind-struck leaves, learning that warmth was a privilege granted only to the loyal. Then there was the Wheel of Silence, where captives were strapped to large wooden wheels and spun slowly in the cold night, staring endlessly at stars until they could no longer distinguish earth from sky. Thought from fear, sanity from madness. Yet despite these horrors, the Khan's justice held a strange balance. The guilty suffered while the innocent were fiercely protected, and this paradox made rulers tremble, unsure whether to fear his cruelty or respect his order. As cities fell without battle and soldiers surrendered before arrows flew, one truth became clear. The Mongol Empire's greatest weapon was not sword nor bow, but the dread carved into the imagination of every trembling leader. And now, as you uncover these hidden stories from the shadows of history, remember, there are still darker secrets waiting to be revealed. So subscribe to the channel, strike the bell, and stand with us as we continue unraveling the legends the world tried to bury.